for. I would like to note that Commissioner Ogg has agreed to examine the allegations concerning members of Parliament mentioned in the recent report of the Committee of Parliamentarians on National Security and Intelligence. The Commissioner's report, I'm quite convinced, will help to strengthen Canada's democracy, democratic institutions, and electoral processes within Canada, and I refer to processes in the plural because, as you know, I hope that the recommendations will also feed into the thinking of our colleagues in provinces, territories, and possibly also at the municipal level as well.
Chair will continue to support the important work of Justice Hogg and her team. They're beginning again a series of interviews with senior government witnesses. So I'll have the privilege of being back in Ottawa in the coming weeks again to meet with the lawyers of the Hogg Commission. Their work is very much on track and continuing. We'll continue, as I said, in a collaborative way, and Madame Drouin spoke to me a few minutes ago in terms of the ongoing dialogue that exists between senior officials of the Privy Council Office who would be responsible for the management of cabinet documents and such, that there is an ongoing active conversation between the Commission, the Commission's lawyers, and the Privy Council Office. So this work will continue, and we very much believe it will result in the Commission having exactly the information it needs to do this work. And I look forward to the discussion, Mr. Chair, and the questions from colleagues. And once again, let me thank you profoundly for scheduling this morning's meeting. It means the world to Madame Drouin and me that we're able to be here with you. So thank you again for that, Mr. Chair.
Minister, my pleasure to have you here. Thank you for making the time in your schedule. Mr. Cooper, the floor will be yours for 6 minutes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Minister LeBlanc, the Globe and Mail reported on May 23rd that the Prime Minister and the Cabinet are withholding an undisclosed number of documents from Madam Justice Hogg, the Commissioner of the Inquiry on Foreign Interference, and the Prime Minister's Department, the PCO, has confirmed that the documents turned over to her, that nearly 10% of those have been redacted. I underscore the documents that are being withheld are documents that Madam Justice Hogg has requested to fulfill her mandate. So what is the Prime Minister hiding from Madam Justice Hogg?
So, Mr. Chair, through you to Mr. Cooper, thank you for the question. The Prime Minister and the government are hiding nothing from the Hogg Commission. The redactions you referred to, and again, if colleagues want technical explanations, Madame Drouin, I'm sure, can provide them, but my understanding is those redactions relate to solicitor-client privilege or cabinet confidence, and that is a fundamental principle of our Westminster parliamentary system. But in no way is the government working at counter purposes to the Commission. As I said, there is an active, ongoing conversation on exactly those documents that Mr. Cooper referred to.
Well, and through you, Mr. Chair, Minister, with respect to that active, ongoing conversation, the reason there's a conversation is because the government is obstructing the work of Madam Justice Hogg. The government is not turning over documents that she sees as relevant to fulfilling her mandate. And I would note that this committee received a letter from counsel to the Commissioner that indicated that with regards to the turning over of documents that Madam Justice Hogg has requested, quote, the interest of the Commission and the interest of the committee would appear to align. So again, I repeat, what is the Prime Minister hiding? And I'll further ask, would you provide the assurance that at the end of these discussions, Madam Justice Hogg will receive every document that she has requested on an unredacted basis?
So, Mr. Chair, our colleague repeated his question. I'll repeat the answer. The government and the Prime Minister are obviously hiding absolutely nothing. We happily set up the Commission with the work and the support of recognized political parties. Mr. Cooper's House Leader, who's a friend of mine, Andrew Scheer, and I worked. And in fact, the terms of reference that were accepted by every party represented at this table contemplated the release of the cabinet documents the Commission has, and also contemplated the protection of cabinet confidence and solicitor-client privilege. So none of this is a surprise.
Minister, I would submit that it is unacceptable for the Prime Minister to pick and choose which documents Madam Justice Hogue can see. Part of Madam Justice Hogue's mandate is to examine decisions made by the Prime Minister and the Cabinet in respect of foreign interference and what the Prime Minister did or failed to do. And in that regard, I would submit the Prime Minister is in a conflict. Again, if he has nothing to hide, then turn over the documents.
So again, our colleague repeats the same question for
I pointed out a clear conflict on the part of the Prime Minister, insofar as a major part of the mandate of Madam Justice Hogue is to examine what the Prime Minister did or failed to do.
So it won't surprise you that characterizing that as a clear conflict is not a submission that I would respect. I think it's interesting, Mr. Chair, there have been 44 federal commissions of inquiry since 1977. Only 5 of them have had access to cabinet confidence. 4 of them were under Liberal governments, actually headed by prime ministers called Trudeau. And the fifth one involved the decision.
Minister,
Mr. Chair, I was answering the question.
Mr. Cooper, I'm going to stop the clock so as to allow you an opportunity to have one more question. But we have invited the minister here to answer questions. I'm going to provide him the opportunity to finish. I'd ask you let him finish that answer in respect to your question, and then I'll start the clock. I'll start the clock again, okay? But let's let him finish the question, or the answer, rather.
So, Mr. Chair, thank you. So, as I said, 4 commissions headed by Liberal governments where the Prime Minister was called Trudeau. The 5th one, these are 5 of 44 that have had access to cabinet confidence. So it tells you it's a very unusual process. And the 5th one was a decision made by the late Brian Mulroney with respect to cabinet confidence in the Oliphant inquiry. So again, Mr. Chair, what's important is that the opposition parties agreed to those terms of reference, and of course now they're manufacturing a lot of indignation with respect to this issue.
Well,
okay, thanks. Thank you, Mr. Cooper. Just so I'm clear, I'm going to restart the clock now. Okay, go ahead, sir.
Well, in fact, the Prime Minister isn't just hiding documents from Madam Justice Hogue. The annual report of NSICOP, released on June 5th, states that the Prime Minister and the government withheld over 1,000 documents from NSICOP and that it is, quote, inappropriately using claims of cabinet confidences to avoid disclosing information. Isn't that exactly what is happening here? And I will repeat again, and it's a very simple yes or no question. Will the Prime Minister turn over every document that Madam Justice Hogue has requested whenever these discussions come to an end?
So, Mr. Chair, our colleague...
Yes or no?
Mr. Chair, our colleague raised NSICOP, or the National Security Intelligence Review Agency. It's Parliament itself in the legislation that protected cabinet confidence when those bodies were created. Neither of the acts that created those bodies created exceptions in terms of access to cabinet confidence. Exceptionally, the Prime Minister has authorized the disclosure of cabinet documents to those bodies. And so, Mr. Chair, I can tell our colleague that at the end of the process that is ongoing and is collaborative, and I hope that somebody will ask Madame Drouin, who has insight into those ongoing conversations with the Commission. It would be inappropriate for me, and it's not politicians that decide what documents are reacted.
The answer appears to be no, since the Minister has refused, I think, at least 3 times to answer that question. And it's clear that the Prime Minister is conveniently withholding documents from Madam Justice Hogue because he does not want her to be able to fully scrutinize his failures to protect our sovereignty and democracy from Beijing's interference.
Thank you, Mr. Cooper. Thank you, Minister.
Just because Mr. Cooper keeps asserting the same thing does not make it true.
Okay, thank you, Minister. Madame Fortier, à vous pour 6 minutes.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you to the Minister for being here, accompanied by Ms. Nathalie Drouin. It's a real pleasure to see you here today. Obviously, Canadians have lots of questions currently, and perhaps it would be good to recall to Canadians, perhaps for people here around the table, when we refer to a confidential or secret document, how do we actually determined what we're going to share or not, and how have we decided, together with Commissioner Ogg, which documents would actually be shared. Could you first determine that for us, please? Mr. Chair, through you, I'd like to respond to Ms. Fortier and say thank you for that question. I'll turn to Ms. Drouin because she's got a great deal of expertise when it comes to the details of your question. But first of all, I'd like to say the following. It's important to point out that at no point in time has the government invoked cabinet confidences to actually withhold documents from the Commission that related to foreign interference incidents. That's very important. Ms. Drouin really pointed that out to me. In the discussion on a friendly basis with the Commission, it is very important that people understand that if there were points in time where the Cabinet was informed about incidents or proposals to counter foreign interference, these documents have already been shared. These Cabinet documents have already been shared with the Commission. But to come back to this question of the criteria that are used to assess this, perhaps Ms. Drouin is in a better position to answer that question. Thank you very much. First of all, the first reference framework is in fact the terms of reference that were granted to the Commission. So it's all about the relevance of the vis-à-vis the terms of reference that we assess this. And the Commission itself does make requests for information. Unfortunately, with all the context and the leaks in the press, that meant that the Commission has had to be very specific in terms of the documents that it wished to obtain. And to go into details about these elements that were referred to by the Minister and the discussions that are ongoing with the Commission. When the time comes to deal with Cabinet confidences, the Commission, of course, understands the importance for the rule of law here to protect Cabinet confidences for reasons of solidarity between ministers and to allow the ministers to freely express their opinions during discussions within Cabinet. But at the same time, the Commission wants to be certain that it has all the elements it needs, in particular in terms of policies, so that it can come out with its recommendations and make sure that it doesn't come out with a recommendation that, for example, may already have been considered by the Cabinet, but for reason X or Y, it hadn't already been raised. So when we work with the Commission, we don't just say, no, you won't have access to this. There's always a discussion about the various components. And of course, we give a particular context to the Commission as well. Now, I'd like to interject, Mr. Chair. Natalie will correct me if I'm mistaken, but these discussions, as you've seen, they are conducted by senior officials within the Privy Council. It's not discussions that are held by political assistants or MPs. No, it's officials within the Privy Council that have that responsibility and that entertain these discussions with the Commission and their representatives. I'm correct? Natalie? Yes. Ms. Fortier. During your introductory remarks or in one of your answers, you said that it's rare that we share as many documents for commissions and public inquiries. Could you continue to explain this a bit more? Why are we giving more here, or why are we participating more this time in particular compared to other inquiries? Why are you sharing documents in this way? Why have you established that in this way this time? Well, answer, as I said, there have been 44 commissions of public inquiry at a federal level since 1977, and there are only 5 where they received documents that were actually covered by Cabinet confidences, and 4 out of the 5 were held under the Prime Minister called Trudeau. And the other one was the deceded Brian Mulroney, where when he was a Prime Minister, he'd authorised certain Cabinet confidences to be handed over to the Oliphant Commission. So it's exceptional. There have been certain commissions of public inquiry that referred to national security in the past where they didn't receive these Cabinet confidence documents. I think it's also important, Mr. Chair, to take note that this was included in the terms of reference. So this pretend surprise where now we're saying, oh, the government, as it's in its right to do so, is protecting cabinet confidences, or the Cabinet Council has been very much understood by parliamentary leaders within all of the recognised parties in the House of Commons, and they accepted that in the terms of reference. Now we're at the end of the parliamentary session. People want to really blow things out of proportion before the end of the session. I don't think it's really a surprise for anyone, really.
Okay. Merci, Madame Forte.
Thank you very much, Madame Forte. There were 15 seconds left, so we can give them back to you later. Good morning now to Madame Gaudreau. You have 6 minutes. Thank you very much. Thank you. I don't think we would have been here today. We could have moved on to something else, but given the fact that, unfortunately, we had this golden opportunity to demonstrate the willingness for things to change. And I would dare to say that with these 70 meetings and so on, we've got the Commission of Public Inquiry that wants to do its job, and it's asking for specific documents. They know what they're looking for, and there's this no. So when we're minister and when this happens, what do we do? Mr. Chair, through you to answer Madame Gaudreau, I'd like to say, yes, I find that I feel that I'm very much at ease. I've been able to work with your parliamentary leader. I've got a great deal of esteem for him. Together, we developed the very specific terms of reference that said that there would be 4 documents from the Privy Council, 4 cabinet documents that we handed over to the Commission, and the parliamentary leaders accepted this. And when the Commission started its work, as Ms. Drouin explained, they had questions about other possible cabinet documents. And there's an active, ongoing collaborative discussion that takes place between the officials from the Privy Council, senior officials, and the Commission. So I feel very much at ease at the end of this parliamentary session. Well, what I can observe is that when we have goodwill, so that we want the Commission of Public Inquiry to do its work well, and everyone around the table is aware of the fact that I'm certainly not partisan of the bloc, and the bloc wants to make sure that the Commission of Public Inquiry can't really succeed because it's got up until the 31st of December, but needs to be equipped with the right tools to do this. And we're talking about an inquiry here. We are here today to say, right, this is enough messing around. There's a job to be done. There's been an extra mandate that's been given. People are concerned and they've lost confidence in our democracy. Can we please correct the course now quickly? Answer. Madame Gaudreau, we're going to continue to work with the Commission. If you allow me to do so, I do agree that the Bloc Québécois in many of these discussions around foreign interference have avoided to fall into extreme partisanship that we've seen demonstrated by other political formations. They weren't able to avoid that temptation. I'd like to congratulate the Bloc Québécois for the motion that was adopted last week. I was happy that the Commission has accepted the clear will of the House of Commons on this matter. And with all due respect and friendship for you, I don't think there's any messing around here. Quite the contrary, we're very much engaged in ensuring that the Commission has all the necessary documents and all the necessary witnesses for the Commission. Here we're focusing in on cabinet documents, which is quite correct, and the Commission wants us to do that, and we're doing it with pleasure. But the Commission has a great deal of access to witnesses. The witnesses can explore these questions of intelligence and foreign interference. If you allow me to point something else out, we have shared all of the highly classified documents that are related to foreign interference and foreign interference incidents because, according to us and according to government lawyers, these are the specific case examples that can be studied by the Commission. I understand, but nevertheless, how come that once again, Minister has to come out in media first? We look to the press and we say, oh, information is not sufficient, the Commission can't do its work, and it comes out in the press. If everything is going well, And if there's constant improvements, then it shouldn't have come out. Is it the last time that we're going to have this splash in the media? Do we know that things are going to go really smoothly now up until the 31st December? I really want to have confirmation because I have the feeling we're going to have something else creeping up and splashing across the Globe and Mail in another 2 months' time. Response, I very much agree with you that we want it to go tickety-boo right up until the 31st of December and go smoothly. I'm confident that we're going to succeed. Now, you'll understand you're a politician yourself, and you're very efficient when it comes to understanding political issues at stake. I'm not responsible for what happens with other colleagues, and I'm not talking about the Bloc Québécois. I can't control what other colleagues say to the Globe and Mail. If that's our assessment scale, then I fear that there are certain colleagues that will exaggerate and say things to other press members or perhaps even turn to the Globe and Mail. Madame Gaudreau, something that's important, and Madame Drouin pointed this out to me just a few moments ago, namely the Cabinet, the Council of Ministers, does not discuss specific incidents of foreign interference. And that's something, well, if there are other questions, perhaps Madame Drouin could give more details on that. It's important for people to understand that the Council of Ministers, when they meet, they do not go into the details of an incident with country X that's tried to interfere in such and such a manner. Rather, these questions are dealt with various ministers with their various powers, but it's not the Cabinet as such. There is no Cabinet document that specifically deals with specific incidents or specific types of intelligence related to foreign interference incidents or alleged foreign interference incidents. But, Madam, if we're very fortunate, then perhaps Madame Drouin can give you an extraordinary exposition on this. Yes, it would be great to hear from her later. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Welcome to PROC. The floor is yours for 6 minutes.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the Minister and for coming to the committee here today. Now, central to the mandate of the Foreign Interference Inquiry and for Commissioner Hogue is to find out who knew what when, and what did the government do about it. So when the inquiry was announced, after much deliberation and push from the NDP, finally we do have this inquiry, which is a good thing. Minister LeBlanc, you actually said in the media, and I quote, Justice Hogue will have full access to all relevant cabinet documents, as well as all other information she deems relevant for the purposes of her inquiry. The Commission is now asking for the unredacted cabinet documents in order to assist them with their work. So if the Commissioner is asking for this, if they did not feel that it was important for them to fulfill their mandate, they wouldn't ask for it. So would the Minister agree with that assessment?
Mr. Chair, through you to our colleague, Ms. Kwan, thank you for the question and thank you for your participation in this important issue over the last number of months. I think Canadians have seen your personal implication in this, and it certainly, I think, speaks to your strength as a parliamentarian, so I just wanted to say that. Ms. Kwan, am comfortable with what I said in that particular media interview, that the Commission will have access to all of the relevant cabinet documents. As I indicated, when I worked with your House Leader, who I've known for a long time, Peter Julian, over the summer, we agreed on a specific list of cabinet documents that the Hague Commission received very early in their mandate. And now, as I said, there is an ongoing conversation between the lawyers of the Hague Commission and senior officials of the Privy Council Office, as they have, as you noted, Ms. Kwan, come to us with requests for additional documents. Again, Madame Drouin would have specific examples. It's not only with respect to cabinet confidence. My understanding is the Hague Commission would come to the Privy Council Office with respect to national security documents that might be in the possession of CSIS or other government agencies. So that is an ongoing conversation that's not only focused, obviously, on cabinet documents per se, but that is, as you noted, part of that conversation.
So I take that to mean to say yes, those are important documents that the Commission would require, whether it's cabinet documents or national security documents, all documents really, for her to fulfill her mandate. I appreciate that House leaders prior to this work come to some sort of agreement, but we have to note those House leaders, of course, is not doing this work. What we have to trust and we have to enable is for the Commission to fully investigate this matter, to restore trust and faith in the hearts and minds of Canadians. So in order for the Commission to properly do this work, then the government needs to facilitate that and to ensure that those documents to which they require that they could actually access. Now, there's ongoing discussion with respect to what other documents will or will not be released. We know about 10% of them is not being released at the moment. So can the minister advise the documents that the government is withholding, whether it's cabinet documents or otherwise, can the minister confirm that those documents would not assist or provide any insight to Commissioner Hogue in fulfilling her mandate of the inquiry?
Mr. Chair, it's a very good question, a precise question, and perhaps Madame Drouin, who would have a better line of sight on the process of which these documents are, could provide a precise answer to Ms. Kwan if it's acceptable.
So, as Minister LeBlanc said, we have already shared 4 MCs with the commissions. And
Madame Drouin, to correct us, MC is a...
memorandum to cabinet.
I tease this deputy ministers, Mr. Chair, often. They use acronyms. MC is a memorandum to cabinet.
So, sorry. Thank you for this precision, Minister. And those cabinet documents were the most relevant to the point, really addressing foreign interference. For example, the memorandum to cabinet regarding hostile actors. So we shared with the Commission in a very transparent way things that were relevant to the point with them. Then the conversation is there other, like accessory conversation that cabinet may have been in the policy sphere? I need to, again, to precise that it's not about specific FI incident. No specific FI incident have been withheld to the Commission. So that, I think, I need to reassure parliamentarians.
Well, thank you for that. But what's important also is not just specific incidences. Of course, that is important. But to the whole question around what did the government do about foreign interference issues and concerns, it does go to the question of policy and not necessarily tied to a specific incident. And if those documents are withheld, how will the commissioner be able to determine what did the government do about it? Because those are precisely related to policy discussions. And shouldn't it be that it would be up to the commissioner to determine whether or not that information is relevant and important for her to fulfill her mandate and not for the government? Because if it was up to the government, we wouldn't actually be sitting here at the moment. We probably wouldn't even need the inquiry.
Ms. Kwan, we're over time, but I'm going to permit an answer.
Sure.
To
Just
your question.
so I agree with Ms. Kwan, Mr. Chair, in the sense that the cabinet documents that considered policy choices, legislative options, and so on around foreign interference were the 4 documents that were given to the cabinet. Those were the time where I and my predecessors went to cabinet with specific proposals around strengthening our democracy. So those documents were shared. I don't want to be technical with Ms. Kwan, but no government, and it's a fundamental principle of a Westminster parliamentary system, no government since Confederation is going to evacuate cabinet confidence to somebody other than the sitting head of the government. In the case, it's the Prime Minister personally, as it was when Mr. Mulroney waived cabinet confidence, and as it was when Pierre Elliott Trudeau did with respect to the MacDonald Commission in the 1970s, and as it is the case where the current Prime Minister did with respect to the Hague Commission. And that was well known. It was very clear in the terms of reference, Mr. Chair, that protecting solicitor-client privilege and cabinet confidence was well understood. Now the back-and-forth process will obviously allow the Hague Commission to do the important work that I agree with Ms. Kwan they need to do.
Thanks very much, Ms. Kwan. Thank you, Minister. Mr. Cooper, the floor is yours for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chair, Minister, now that you've confirmed that a mere 4 cabinet documents have been turned over to Madam Justice Hogue, how many cabinet documents are being withheld from her?
Mr. Chair, I don't have the specific number. Those are decisions that perhaps Madame Drouin could elaborate on, but I also think it's a fundamental principle.
It was just a simple question. How many documents have been withheld? You can't answer that. I find it astounding that a mere 4 documents have been turned over to Madam Justice Hogue that Madame Drouin said were deemed to be the most relevant. Who determined those documents to be the most relevant? The Prime Minister, the PCO, Madam Justice Hogue? Who determined that?
I did with your House Leader, Mr. Cooper, last summer.
I don't think that that is accurate. And since that time, Madam Justice Hogue has requested additional documents that are being withheld by your government, documents that go to the heart, potentially, about what the Prime Minister did or didn't do about foreign interference. I'm going to ask you a different question, because we know that you have confirmed when I asked you, by refusing to answer, that the Prime Minister will not turn over all of the documents requested by Madam Justice Hogue. But on another matter of concern, when you appeared at the Public Safety Committee, I asked you twice if you could provide the assurance that no one serving in Justin Trudeau's cabinet is among the MPs named in the NSICOP report who wittingly collaborated with a hostile foreign state. Twice you refused to answer that question, so I'm going to ask you a third time. Can you provide that assurance?
Mr. Chair, Mr. Cooper has asked that question a number of times in committee and in the House of Commons. My answer remains the same. I took note of what Deputy Commissioner Flynn of the RCMP said when he testified yesterday before a committee as well. Getting into precisions with respect to specific intelligence information, including the numbers of people that may be a source of comments in various intelligence documents, is not something that we're permitted to do. And again, Mr. Cooper can ask the same question, but he's going to get the same answer, Mr. Chair.
In fact, the Prime Minister saw the NSICOP report. The Prime Minister made the final determination with respect to the redactions. The Prime Minister blacklisted the names of those MPs. So I'll ask you this. Can you provide the assurance that once Madam Justice Hogue completes her work, that the names of the MPs who wittingly collaborated with hostile foreign states will be made public?
Mr. Chair, just to correct again another falsehood that Mr. Cooper asserted, that the Prime Minister made those redactions in the NSICOP report, I would draw him to comments of Alex Ruff, who made it very clear before the committee that none of the redactions of the NSICOP report were made by any political person, by a political staffer, by a minister, and the idea that the Prime Minister has a black marker and spends his time redacting the NSICOP.
You know it,
Mr. Cooper knows, Mr. Chair, Mr. Cooper knows it's fake.
Hey. Okay. Just a minute here. First of all, the interpreters have a job to do. Second of all, there's no quality answer and no quality question that can be given or asked when we can't make out what's being said. I've stopped the clock. Minister, I'm going to give you the floor. If in about the next 15 seconds you can finish that response, Mr. Cooper, there's a minute 21 remaining. You'll have the opportunity to resume your line of questioning. Minister, the floor is yours.
So thank you, Mr. Chair. I just think it's important not to assert something in a preamble to a question that's completely inaccurate, that his colleague clarified, and then move on to another question. It doesn't do a service for the public understanding of this issue.
Thanks, Minister. I'm going to restart the clock. A minute 21, Mr. Cooper.
Minister, answer the question. Can you provide the assurance that once Madam Justice Hogue completes her work, that the names of the MPs who wittingly collaborated with hostile foreign states, or any foreign state for that matter, wittingly and knowingly, will be made public?
Mr. Chair, I don't think that it would be appropriate for me to offer legal advice to a Court of Appeal Justice on what would be her obligations in terms of a public report with respect to national security information. Again, if you assert the falsehood in the question and ask for an answer, it doesn't make the premise accurate.
So you can't provide that assurance. Can you at least provide the assurance given that the Prime Minister knows the names of the MPs who wittingly collaborated with hostile foreign states, including potentially MPs in the Liberal caucus, that none of those MPs will have their nomination papers signed by the Prime Minister to run in the next election. Will you provide that, at least that assurance?
Minister, we've got
if you're not going to be transparent in any other respect.
About 10 seconds to answer that, Mr.
Yeah, so I think it might be more constructive for Mr. Cooper's leader to accept the government's offer to receive the security clearance and see the unredacted report that Mr. Cooper seems to be happy to talk about, not having seen it. It might be more useful if his leader saw the report, and then he might be able to make those very judgments that Mr. Cooper referred to a second ago.
Thank you, Mr. Cooper. Thank you, Minister. Mr. Gerritsen, the floor is yours for 5 minutes.
Thank you. I'll bring that next time. Minister, thank you for being here. On June the 10th, Alex Ruff, who is a member of NSICOP, said, and I quote, "To build on what Mr. McGuinty said, I am 100% in agreement. The Prime Minister is not redacting anything." End quote. Mr. Ruff is a member of NSICOP. Mr. Cooper is just throwing out wild allegations based at best on speculation. Who do you think the public should believe, Mr. Ruff or Mr. Cooper? And Mr. Ruff is a Conservative member of Parliament who sits on NSICOP.
Mr. Chair, through you to our colleague, Mr. Gerritsen, thank you for the question. And I think that you highlight exactly one of the challenges in this space. So when colleagues, often benefiting from parliamentary privilege and the immunity that comes with that, assert a series of falsehoods and then purport to ask a question, it leads to a considerable disservice in the public understanding something as important as who gets to decide what portions of a report done by representatives of all political parties, including senators from the other place, Mr. Ruff being one of them, who would have been in those rooms while that report was being prepared, and for him to confirm that the redactions of that report are done by officials with zero input from any political staff person, from an elected person, and again, just to lay bare the falsehood of Mr. Cooper, the idea that the Prime Minister redacted that report. I think Mr. Ruff answered that very compellingly and confirmed that that is absolutely bogus.
I'll turn the rest of my time to Mr. Duguid.
Thank you, Mr. Gerritsen. Mr. Duguid, there's about 3 minutes, 15 seconds for your time.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to Ms. Drouin and Minister LeBlanc for appearing before us. Mr. Chair, this is a public meeting, I think, as everyone knows, and I'm sure the public has noted the enthusiasm with which Mr. LeBlanc is here today to speak to us. But I think I'll direct my question to Ms. Drouin. Again, because this is a public meeting, some of these terms that we're throwing around, cabinet confidence, solicitor-client privilege, I wonder if you could reflect a bit for us, why cabinet confidence is important, and this is a practice, as Mr. LeBlanc has noticed, in Commonwealth parliaments around the world, and has been practiced for a century and a half in our country. Why it is important, and what are the risks associated to national security in providing unfettered access to classified documents and waiving of cabinet confidence, and maybe a reflection as well on solicitor-client privilege, just so the public can really understand this. This can perhaps be a learning moment.
Perfect. Let me start with the easiest one, solicitor-client privilege. This is really enshrined into our Constitution, making sure that you do have access to legal advice and that those legal advice will remain protected. And that privilege also applies to the Crown. When it comes to cabinet confidence, as Minister said previously, this is really at core of our Westminster system. And this is to allow ministers to give, options, opinion, advice to the cabinet, and then after a decision has been taken, to have that solidarity behind the decision. And we don't want to feather that in any shape or form in order to respect or to have a strong democracy. And let me make a link with FI, the foreign interference. Sorry again, I will learn. The first goal of foreign actors is to attack our democracy. This is really the first goal. So we need to protect our tools that are there in order to protect our democracy. And so this is why I think that cabinet confidence, this is not a partisan conversation. This is something that we should be proud of and that is absolutely essential for any government to govern. So that's about, in terms of intelligence. I'm sure you have heard
Madame
about
Drouin,
the challenge between using...
Madame Drouin, sorry to interrupt. I will let you finish, but if you could try to keep it to about 30,
Sorry about
45
that.
in your final segment. Thank you.
You've heard about intel to evidence. I'm sure you have heard about that. The reason is that when we collect intelligence, we are doing espionage in a way. We are doing that covertly. We are not giving the targets the opportunity to be heard. So throwing information in the public domain will not be responsible. On top of that, it can burn the essential sources that we have. So this is why we really need to be very careful.
Thank you, Madame Drouin. You may appreciate my father used to joke tongue-in-cheek that this was an AFZ, meaning an acronym-free zone. So I appreciate that there are many acronyms, of course, that we use. Ms. Kwan, the floor is yours for two... Oh, excuse. Non, c'est Madame Gaudreau, premièrement. My apologies. The same amount of time will be given. Sorry, colleagues. Madame Gaudreau, malheureusement, j'ai fait une erreur.
Madame Gaudreau, sorry I made a mistake. It's over to you for 2 minutes 30. Excellent. I don't have much time, but let's talk about solutions now. We all agree here that there's over-classification. That's a culture that we've maintained, a culture of secrecy. For example, even if we compare with what's happening with Five Eyes countries and our neighbouring countries, we overclassify. That's quite clear. Now, we can't have a complete volte-face, complete turnaround. But for the good of the Commission, could our minister undertake at least to summarise certain documents but not redact the majority of the content so that the Commission can actually have enough components to do its work correctly? Can we have this undertaking from the Minister so that we don't meet again in another 3 months and say that things are not going smoothly and she's not able to do her work? Response. Our colleague, Madame Gaudreau. Without any hesitation, I can give the undertaking that we'll continue, as we've done so far as a government, when we were drawing up the terms of reference and also since the Commission got up and running to do its work. We will continue to ensure that the Commission has access to all of the documents that the Commission needs to do its work. As I already mentioned, and as Madame Drouin has already mentioned, I also understand, I was also in the opposition as an MP. We shouldn't be too specific with certain statements, and I'm not attributing that to you, Madame Gaudreau, to remain correct with all of this. But the fact that Mr. Mulroney or Mr. Harper or any other government or Mr. Trudeau's father is not going to sweep away these principles that have existed for a long time. At the same time, we've shown openness to collaborate, but the Commission, we've lifted the veil on cabinet confidences so that the Commission was able to have the documents it needed to do its work. But as I said in my opening comments, this is an active, ongoing discussion, and I've got full confidence in our colleagues within the Privy Council, the senior officials that continue with these discussions. And Madame Gaudreau, I'm quite convinced that we won't be obliged to be here in another 3 months still discussing about certain points that have perhaps been expressed in the media and that perhaps don't give an exact snapshot of the work that's taking place between the government and the Commission. I really hope from the bottom of my heart that that is the case. Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you, Minister.
The floor is yours for 2.5 minutes.
Thank you. I appreciate what the Minister just said, with the exception, though, that the Commissioner is not getting access to all the documents. She's made the request, and there are documents that are being withheld. And so I'm going to ask then maybe Madame Drouin this question. How many cabinet documents are being withheld?
I find this question interesting. So,
sorry, I'm just going to interrupt very quickly. I only have 2.5 minutes.
Perfect.
If you can just give me a short answer.
Like, I don't have the numbers, but if you're going to like that, many documents have been withheld. Of course, we haven't shared memorandum about dental. Of course, we haven't shared memorandum about pharmacare.
Thank you for that, Mr. Chair, if I may.
So this is why it's impossible to respond how many have we withheld.
Thank you, Ms. Kwan. I won't redact that from your time. So
obviously, Mr. Chair, thank you to Madame Drouin. I'm not talking about document that's not relevant to the inquiry and his mandate. I'm talking about how many documents are being withheld that's relevant to the mandate of the inquiry.
I think I told you that all relevant documents that were to the point, talking about foreign interference, protecting our democracy. This is why those 4 big memorandum to cabinet, in order to be transparent, have been shared with them. They are the ones to the point that are really helping the Commission.
All right. Then can Madame Drouin confirm for this committee that there are no documents that are being withheld that would assist or provide any insight to Commissioner Hogue to fulfill her mandate? Can she just say yes or no to that question?
I cannot say, unfortunately, Monsieur le Président, I cannot say yes or no. Like maybe other memorandum to cabinet, talking about economic security, for example, that can talk about impacts of FI on our economy. So maybe there are some things that can be accessories to the main and relevant thing. And those are the conversations we can continue to have, but nothing to the point have been withheld from the Commission.
Well, even just on the issue, foreign interference related to the economy would be a critical document, because that could be a reason why the government took certain actions or didn't take certain actions, Mr. Chair, and that's precisely the point. It should not be for the government to make that determination, but rather for an independent commissioner to make that determination. Ultimately, what we all want coming out of this inquiry is to have faith in the process and into the inquiry and its outcome. If documents are withheld, you are going to undermine and undercut the work of the commissioner. I feel very strongly about that, and Canadians cannot afford it. This government cannot afford it. None of us could. And that's why it's so important for the government to release all documents that the commissioner is requesting.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Kwan. We're quite a bit over, but I am going to permit the minister just a moment.
Chair, just very briefly, I just want to correct something Ms. Kwan said. The commission was set up to look at foreign interference in democratic institutions and democratic processes. We specifically did not set up a commission to look at economic interference. So to be very precise, that was a discussion we had with House leaders. The terms of reference are clear. So to use the example that Madame Drouin properly used, and then Ms. Kwan ran with the idea that documents around Investment Review Act decisions that Mr. Champagne and I might make are specifically excluded by the terms of reference because Madame Justice Hogue is focusing on democratic institutions and foreign interference. I just think we need to be very precise about that.
Okay, thanks very much, Ms. Kwan. Thank you, Minister. Monsieur Berthold, à vous, 5 minutes.
Monsieur Leblanc, fardeau de la...
5 minutes. the burden of proof is on the shoulders of the Prime Minister and your government. Why? It's because you've been very nonchalant, at least on 3 occasions. The Prime Minister has refused to listen to the recommendations asking to publish documents or to provide information to MPs. And then secondly, there were lots of different attempts to refuse to answer questions. And then there was the nomination of a special rapporteur that really didn't work, and nobody had confidence in that. And now with Justice Ogg and with the preliminary report, we were quite right in not showing confidence and putting trust in the special rapporteur. And it seems that the most appropriate documents apparently are going to be handed over to Justice Ogg according to the National Security Advisor. But by chance, the most relevant documents are, in fact, the documents that were covered by leaks by Mr. Bob Fife. So the 4 cabinet memoranda were the memoranda that appeared in the press. So, Minister, do the documents have to be leaked to the press so that they then become relevant for the Ogg Commission? First of all, Chair, and my friend Mr. Berthold, the answer is no. But I'd like to correct once again something, and Madame Drouin perhaps would like to add something. The leaks that we've seen did not refer to the 4 cabinet documents that we handed over to the Commission. So that really is a mistake. No, it's not a mistake. 4 other documents. There are other documents that should have been handed over, but were not handed over to Justice Ogg. How many documents have been handed over to her, and how many have not been handed over? You've been avoiding that question from the outset, and I'd like to cite Madame Drouin. She said, unfortunately, with the leaks, this has allowed the Commission to be very specific in its requests. So Justice Ogg has very specific documentation requests, and on the other hand, we're hearing that Justice Ogg does not have access to all documents. So, Minister Leblanc, why is your government so opaque and is not wanting to play this game of transparency to restore Canadians' confidence in the system? Response, Mr. Chair, I see that our colleagues are bursting out laughing with that comment from Mr. Berthold. It was a Liberal colleague who was laughing, says Mr. Berthold. He knows very well, Mr. Chair, that we've acted in good faith and we've been very transparent with the Ogg Commission. But, Chair, do you see the type of confusion that creeps in here? Mr. Berthold has asserted that these were cabinet documents that appeared in the press. In fact, they were documents from the security agencies that were covered by these leaks. And 46,000 documents of this type have already been handed over to the Ogg Commission. So there's a great deal of confusion, it seems, between the highly classified intel documents and, on the other hand, a few documents, as Mr. Harper already maintained as well during his time in government, that they're covered by cabinet confidence. Minister, I'll give the floor to Mr. Berthold. Thank you very much. So it's not time to talk about Mr. Harper. We're talking about you. We're talking about your government that from the outset has done everything it can to stop shedding light on foreign interference and has been covering up names and reported and is not taking action. And you're saying that these are documents that were not for the cabinet, but unfortunately the national security agencies wanted these documents to be read by the cabinet, Mr. Leblanc. That's where the confusion started. How can we trust the Liberals currently with that? We want to have confidence in Justice Ogg's report. So why are you refusing to give her access to all of the documents that she is requesting? Response, Mr. Chair, that's another example of this type of confusion. Our colleague, Mr. Berthold, is seen camouflaging, covering up the names, but following criminal legislation kind of doesn't mean that we're exactly camouflaging names. And then he refers to a parliamentary report. The Conservatives voted against the creation of the National Security Intelligence Committee of Parliamentarians. The former government didn't set up any measures to bring about transparency, as we have seen right away in this very conversation today. And then to round off, Chair, I have full confidence in the work undertaken by Justice Ogg, and I have full confidence that her report is going to shed light and restore confidence for Canadians and give possible solutions to the government, and I hope also to the Parliament, to further reinforce our measures to counter foreign interference, as we've done since we came into power. Mr. Berthold, just a few seconds left. Mr. Berthold, just to specify something. The national report from NCICOP, which was published on the 5th of June, clearly stated that the Prime Minister and the government have withheld 1,000 documents from the committee by saying, or by using in an appropriate way, cabinet confidences to avoid to render public this information. That's exactly what NCICOP said. And Mr. Leblanc, the confusion is on your side, I think, with everything we've seen over the last 2 or 3 years in terms of foreign interference. I think it's time to tidy up things and fully collaborate with the justice. If you want to have give an answer, Madame Drouin, quickly. Madame Drouin. We're certainly not talking about 1,000 cabinet memoranda. As senior officials, when we draw up a memorandum for the cabinet, there are several emails that are related to that. There's lots of different versions related to this memorandum to cabinet. There may be speaking points developed for respective ministers for the purposes of the cabinet discussion. So one file within the cabinet can generate an incredible panoply of various documents. So I'm very comfortable in affirming to you that we're not talking about 1,000 cabinet files as such. I'm extremely comfortable in saying that. And I'd like to repeat, please, quickly, Madame Drouin, in the Commission of Public Inquiry, there will be no intelligence documents from our security agencies have been withheld from the Commission. They have everything that they've asked for in terms of the work undertaken by our 2 main agencies. Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Berthold. Thank you, Madame Drouin. Mr. Gerritsen.
Speaker for this round. 5 minutes to you.
Thank you, and thank you to both Minister LeBlanc and Madame Drouin for being here today and answering these questions. I think the frustration that you're seeing from across the table from my Conservative colleagues comes from the fact that they're not able to get you to help feed their narrative of secrecy. They're extremely frustrated by that, and I think that it's evident that's because you've answered the questions very clearly and directly today. And the reality is if you were somebody to walk in this room and sit at the back of the room and having just listened to what we listened to today, I think you would have heard very clearly Minister LeBlanc saying that the terms of reference for the Hogue Commission and the documents to be turned over were set up in collaboration with the House leaders, including Andrew Scheer, the House Leader of the Conservative Party, and the other House leaders last summer, and that the documents that were requested have been turned over, and that the Privy Council Office continues to work with the Hogue Commission to ensure that documents that she needs and wants are provided. My question, and this actually goes on a topic that we haven't talked about today, and that's the various different party leaders and their willingness to get security clearance so that they can read the unredacted version of the Hogue Commission's report. We know that obviously the Prime Minister has seen that. We know that the leader of the NDP has. We now know that the leader of the Bloc Québécois is receiving his security clearance to do that. Yet we also know that the leader of the Conservative Party, Mr. Poilievre, has chosen willingly to not receive the security clearance in order to see an unredacted version of the report. I'm wondering, Minister, if you can provide some insight as to why that might be, and if not, perhaps provide context as to why it's incredibly important for a leader of a political party to take the opportunity to look at that information.
So, Mr. Chair, through you to our colleague, Mr. Gerritsen, I think that your question is an important one because it goes to the very nature of what some people in the House of Commons continue to do, is to create deliberately an exaggerated or misleading narrative, while at the same time not benefiting from a government offer that stands, again, this morning, or I guess in early afternoon, for the Leader of the Opposition to receive the appropriate security clearance and then see the unredacted version. The fact that Ms. May and the Leader of the NDP took the government offer, took up the government offer, we think is very constructive. You'll note that they seem to have a different view, having read the document one from the other. That perhaps tells us that it's important for people to come to their own conclusions, having seen the unredacted report of the committee. Those redactions, as we noted earlier, were done by officials responsible for national security, the protection of national security information, not done politically. So why the Leader of the Opposition would refuse to do, I can't speculate. I wondered the same thing, Mr. Gerritsen, myself. But I do think it would be important for the credibility of his caucus colleagues who continue to make outlandish and absurd allegations and assertions. They might have, petit moment de gêne, a little hesitation to do that if their boss said, you know what, guys, like, you're really making this stuff up. I don't know how their caucus would work. Neither would you, I assume, Mr. Gerritsen. But certainly, I think there might be a little hesitancy to continue making stuff up all the time if your boss knew that what you were saying day after day may not be.
Ignorance is bliss.
That might be one of the strategies there, but it's an interesting thing. Perhaps we could talk about that over the summer.
Right. Okay. Thank you very much, Minister.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Gerritsen. Colleagues, that concludes the first panel for the day. Minister LeBlanc, thank you very much for making yourself available and joining us here this morning. Madame Drouin, thank you as well. Colleagues, Madame Drouin will be staying with us for the next hour. A friendly reminder that the next hour is not a continuation of this study. The next hour is a continuation of our study on the cyber attacks, which we have been talking about previously. We are going to suspend very briefly in order to turn over, and we'll I could ask you to please take your seats. Trouvez vos sièges, please.
Find your seats.
We are going to continue with the second half of our meeting. The second half of the meeting is a continuation of our study in relation to the question of privilege related to cyber attacks targeting members of Parliament. Of course, we've been undertaking a conversation around this in recent weeks. Carried over from the previous session, Madame Drouin, welcome back. Thank you for being here with us. Madame Drouin, of course, the Deputy Clerk of the Privy Council and the National Security and Intelligence Advisor to the Prime Minister. And Madame Xavier, welcome back. Nice to see you again. Thank you for joining us. Madame Xavier is the Chief of the Communications Security Establishment. Between the two of you witnesses, il y a jusqu'à 10 minutes.
You have up to 10 minutes.
You certainly don't have to take all of that time if you don't feel it's necessary. We will then enter our usual rounds of questioning. With that, Madame Drouin and Madame Xavier, I'll turn the floor over to you for upwards of 10 minutes combined. Thank you.
Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for giving us the opportunity to speak to you today, and I'll give you some opening remarks from me, and then also we'll hear from the Chief of the CST. Thank you for accompanying me today. I know that she has come here on several occasions. Her expertise is essential given the subject that we're tackling today. So I'm Deputy Clerk of the Privy Council and National Security Intelligence Advisor to the Prime Minister since January 27, 2024. And recently, as part of this committee's work, members have heard testimony from my colleague, as I've already previously stated, and you've talked about cyber threats from foreign actors. Cyber espionage programs sponsored by China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea pose a real threat to Canada. These actors exploit our weaknesses at various levels, and in so doing, they aim, as I've said earlier this morning, to erode our democracy in order to pursue their geopolitical objectives at Canada's expense.
Is not the only state who directs cyber threat activity towards Canada. I must emphasize the far-reaching and sustained nature of the PRC's cyber activities. PRC cyber actors have targeted and continue to target the systems and networks of a wide spectrum of Canadian society, including all levels of government, private sector organization, as well as individuals. All these aspects of Canadian society have information that could be considered valuable to the PRC. The scope of this threat is significant. The more we discuss, the more we understand how to best respond to these threats from a whole of society perspective. The Government of Canada has warned Canadians of the cyber threat caused by state actors. And most recently, on June 3rd, the Ministers of Foreign Affairs, National Defense, and Public Safety issued a public statement warning Canadians on the threat posed by foreign states targeting Canada. The statement and the CSC cyber threat bulletin that were released highlighted the interference in our democratic system that has resulted from these efforts. The Canadian Centre for Cybersecurity has joined international partners in issuing public advisories to inform on techniques used by the PRC state actors and also by those, and most importantly, how to mitigate those threats. The use of cybermen by the PRC and other states to interfere in our political system will not stop. And to address that threat, we must continue to take steps to reinforce Canada's overall resiliencies to hostile cyber activity. The government is in the process of renewing Canada's national cyber security strategy, which we anticipate will bring a wide range of initiatives over the course of its implementation. En ce qui concerne la cybersécurité des...
When it comes to cybersecurity for parliamentarians, a certain number of changes have taken place in recent years. The Canadian Cybersecurity Centre works closely with various partners, including the House of Commons and Senate staff, in order to protect parliamentarians from cyber threats. CSIS also plays an important role in identifying and responding to threats to the security of Parliament.
The Minister of Public Safety issued a direction to CSIS on threats to the security of Canada directed to Parliament and parliamentarians. CSIS and CSE and other departments and agencies have also undertaken a significant number of briefings to parliamentarians on a wide range of threats, including cyber threats. Security clearances have been offered to party leaders to enable a more direct understanding of the threats facing parliamentarians and all Canadians. As a result, the level of information sharing and transparency regarding threats to parliamentarians is much higher now than a few years ago, and we continue to learn and improve our system. I would be remiss if I do not underline the important work of NCCOP and NCRA. Chair, allow me to use those acronyms because I think you know them well. As illustrated in their recent reports on foreign interference in Canada's election, those two organizations have enriched the public understanding and the public debate regarding national security and intelligence in Canada. These reports have highlighted the use of cyber tools by threat actors to interfere in democratic institutions and to undertake espionage campaigns against political parties and parliamentarians. Dans son rapport spécial,
In its special report, the NCCOP mentioned that a cyber actor led by the State of the People's Republic of China had unsuccessfully targeted members of the Interparliamentary Alliance on China. By way of conclusion,
incident in question was handled in 2021. However, I can say that the Government of Canada is very focused on how to best inform parliamentarians of national security threats. Dans une société démocratique, la lutte
In a democratic society, combating threats to national security